what we actually installed was 30 more each year for the last 3 years.
So you're saying that we have an increase from last year?
So the year before last, we put out about 1,035. Picked up anyone else? All right, great. So welcome to the May 22nd Rotary Club meeting. And again, remember this meeting is being recorded, and we'll make that available to other members that have not come forth yet, that have not made the meeting, and we'll have them there. And happy Memorial Day weekend to everyone. Let's go to the next slide. I think you were sharing today. Remember to mute your cell phones, and we'll try to keep everyone on mute during discussions. But if you need to say something, press your space bar or go to the lower left corner. There's a little microphone down there that says mute on it, and you can click on that, and that'll unmute you if you wish to participate. Please stand and join me in the pledge to the American flag. It might be good if you unmuted everybody on this one, Celeste. It doesn't just pick up me.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the United
States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
one
nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And please remain standing for the Texas Pledge. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. Okay. And the four-way test, if you'll join me on the four-way test, you can go ahead and be seated if you will. The four-way test are the things we think, say, or do. First,
is it the truth?
Second,
is it fair to all concerned?
Third, will it
build better friendships?
Fourth,
will it be beneficial to all concerned?
Rotary. Thank you. Okay, and please join me in the Rotary prayer today. Oh God, giver of all goods, thank you for all our daily gifts. May Rotary friends and Rotary ways help to serve us through all our days. Amen. And charity of the month is Hugs Cafe. And Sharon, if you want to make a quick statement about the cards, this might be a good place to do it.
Okay. Meals on Wheels, instead of delivering daily now because of COVID-19, are delivering only every 2 weeks. So they're delivering frozen meals that people can unthaw and have a meal every day. And so the shut-ins, many of them are not seeing anybody at all now. Every 2 weeks they might see a driver, but the driver's even dropping off at the door and then standing, 6 to 8 feet back just to make sure that the person comes to the door to get the food. So isolation could be a big problem with these people. So what they're doing is carrying cards for seniors. So I started going through some of my desk, and I literally have about 150 of those freebie cards, that you get in the mail from various associations. And so I've been opening them up, and I just write, thinking of you, hope you have a good day, Sharon. And I will be delivering those to Meals on Wheels, so that, and some of us are delivery drivers in Rotary, but it would be helpful if any of you would take time to do 2 or 3 or 5 or 10. I think Mike's got 31 to bring. Robert Camp is getting his whole office to work on it. They're real excited about it. Carol Oinby has indicated she's going to be bringing me some, and Bob Thomas just mentioned that he's going to be bringing some. So I hope that some of the rest of you might be interested in doing so. I also thought, some of my friends who don't have anything to do during the day might be interested. So I emailed about 15 of them, And I've already had, just in the past day or two, I've had 4 of them either drop off or email that they're bringing. One brought 22 cards yesterday. So I would love it if we could deliver, 300 or 400 cards, something like that. I'm going to probably have, like I said, about 125 to 150. So if everybody brings some, maybe get your friends. You can drop them off 2 ways, a no contact drop off. You can drop them off only between 9 a.m. and noon weekdays, and I think it's actually Monday through Thursday at Meals on Wheels. There would be a sign on the front door, you do not enter, but there would be a sign where to put them. It's in the email that I sent you, the address. An easier way, I'll be glad to take them. I would even probably be a closer drop off for you. I'm at 315 North Wattle Street. It's the southwest corner of Wattle and Lamar. It's a tan brick house. Just drop them on my front porch. I go out and every day and I'm finding, cards in a sack or an envelope on my front porch. So would appreciate any help. And there's no time limit on this. So if you do it 2 weeks from now or tomorrow, whatever, it doesn't matter. I'll get them to the Meals on Wheels for the seniors. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Next slide. Bob Thomas, you're up, sir.
Well, I think it's great to be with everybody today. And I would just say welcome to this Memorial Day weekend virtual transmission. And I would also remind us that on this very day, May 22, in 1807, a gentleman by the name of Townsend Speakman sold the first fruit-flavored carbonated drink in Philadelphia. On this very date, May 22nd, Townsend Speakman sold the first fruit-flavored carbonated drink in Philadelphia. Also on this very date, May 22nd, 1843, the first wagon train with 700 to 1,000 migrants headed from Independence, Missouri to the great state of Oregon. On this very day, May 22nd, 1843. The wagon train was headed from Independence, Missouri for Oregon. So it's great to have everybody here with us today, and looking forward to a very nice Memorial Day weekend.
Thank you, Bob. Next slide, please. Bragg Books. Anybody have anything they want to bring up today?
Bob Thomas owes you a little bit more money. His granddaughter, Everly Grace Thomas. Everly Grace Thomas. Everly Grace Thomas. I always have to repeat her name 3 times because
you got it wrong.
I think I introduced her to the Rotary Club with the wrong name. So I have gotten it right now. Her nickname is Evie, and she graduated from kindergarten this morning. It was a virtual ceremony, about 20 minutes long, but I think she had a cap and gown on. I don't know that for certain, but I believe that to be the case.
Thank you for that, Bob. Anyone else have anything?
Hey, Mike, this is Pete McClellan. I got a couple.
Go ahead.
I had surgery the other day on my knee, and I'm grateful that everything seemed to come out okay and didn't feel a thing. So I was grateful for that. And the other thing I'm grateful for is we got blessed 2 ways. A week ago Thursday night, heavy wind knocked down one of our 85-foot ash trees on top of our house and knocked off the chimney and put that right in our family room. So put a hole in the roof about 15 feet by 12 feet, and took them 3 days to get the tree off the roof. But we're in recovery mode right now. So I'd say we got blessed 2 ways. One, neither Downey nor I suffered any injury, so we're grateful for that. And we're really grateful that we paid the premium on the insurance.
Awesome. Well, prayers for you on both that they come out fine.
Like, somebody just asked for my address and I was trying to type it on and I've typed it, but it's not appearing. So does anybody tell me what I'm doing wrong?
Okay, let's see. But it may be going, does it say everyone? Where you're,
Yes.
okay, so repeat your address and I'll try to type it in.
Okay, 315 North Waddle, Wadddill Street, the southwest corner of Waddle and Lamar, and Brick. There it goes. Thank you.
All right, great, thank you. All right, next slide, please. Don't forget to check in on Facebook. You guys doing a great job of that. Next. No changes in the district information. Make sure you know about it. Next Wednesday night, they have the district conference again. That's fine. Go ahead. It's at 7 o'clock on Zoom. On announcements, I wanted to take just a minute, talk about the meeting next plan for the 29th in person. We have the Holocaust, Charlotte DeCoster speaking. Here's what we know so far. Frank Walker's working that in detail, but we don't have all the final information, but I'll try to put together what we do know. Social distancing will be in place, so that means you can't get close to one another, or you won't be sitting and holding hands with your best friend. There will be vacancies between people sitting there. That means we won't have 10 top tables. We'll have some smaller amount of people at each table further apart. We will not have a buffet, and those were at the March 13th meeting. I think we had about 20 something of us there when we had the Falcon and Owls at the meeting. And also I'll mention no power downtown, which are probably trying to Zoom that day because we had no internet or anything else. But we will not have a buffet. We know distancing will be in place. There will be other precautions. We'll ask that you bring a mask and that you wear a mask anytime you're not at the table. So if you're up moving around the room, coming in the room or leaving the room and so on, there'll be hand sanitizer there. And there's plenty of other rules that Rick's will have to put in place that'll happen. So we're doing our best to ensure that safety. Here's the issue I have. I asked for an RSVP, and we picked that day because at the last couple of meetings, people said, oh, not the 22nd, but the 29th would be good. It's Memorial Day. People are not going out of town. Well, that seems to be not true. The only 3 people I've heard say no, say they're traveling. So that may be an issue. To date, I only have 10 RSVPs, and we're going to be on the hook Monday to get, even though it's a holiday, to give Rick's a head count. I forecasted 35 back when. I think that number is more like 25. We have about 25 people here today. And so it would really be helpful if you could send me a quick note, just says, yes, I'll be there. You don't need to respond if you're not going to be there, so that I can try to make an educated guess next week, because whatever we say is what we're going to pay. So I want to be prudent with the club's money as best I can. Is there any comments? I'll try to put that together in a little bit of an email next week. Like now, like say, Frank's been working with them really close, but the rules are changing all the time. So, but Rick's has really been doing a good job of following that. When we picked up the food to go to Baylor, which is one of the next things here, Frank and I went back and had lunch at Bill Smith's, and it was like about every other table, but the place was packed. And quite honestly, there wasn't many people I saw wearing masks. I had one hanging from my ear, and so on. But they were pretty well packed, even though they had about, I think they were at 50% people they could have there, and they had tables blocked out and chairs blocked out, so you had to do it. But I expect Rick's to be a little bit tighter than what I saw at Bill's. And by the way, Bill Smith has done us a fantastic job. Thanks to CC and Frank for working that out. Bob, don't make me go get my big dog now in here, my 85-pound boxer, to see you. All right, and so next week, CC's aligned us up to go to Medical City Tuesday to deliver meals there, and Mark and I will be hauling those over and give them to that group. And of course, we also did, I mentioned last week, we made a donation to the local food pantry too. So thanks to all of y'all for contributing to that. It's truly appreciated by the people there. Anyone else have an announcement? Super. Okay, let's give a chance for Colin Kendall to get to share his PC. So Colin, if you'll click on your sorry, I got a message pop up there. If you click on share, open your PowerPoint and click on share, and there ought to be a little picture of your PowerPoint. You click on that. You're sharing your screen. See what happens here. There it is. Yay. Awesome. Great job. So Colin's not a stranger to us. Frank was going to be here to help introduce him, but I'll let you introduce yourself, Colin. You've been here plenty of times, so I think most of us are very familiar with you. So thank you again for coming in and helping us out on this great Memorial Day. Colin Kimball.
Thank you, Mike. For those of you who have not met me before, I'm Colin Kimball. I founded the North Texas Fallen Warrior Portrait Project probably about 6 years ago, along with my great friend and Marine Corps veteran, Vietnam veteran, Ronnie Foster, who you probably also know. So today I'd just like to give you a little update on where we are with the project and show you some of the new portraits that are scheduled to go into portrait in the courthouse. Right now, I'm losing count because it keeps growing, but we're well north of 70 portraits. We normally put a portrait in each day, each commissioner's court following Memorial Day, but this year due to the COVID virus, we're not. But we will be doing a portrait installation in November. So I'll certainly avail myself to make you aware of when that is so that you can come and participate. Just wanted to talk briefly about Memorial Day. You know, don't thank a veteran. This is not our day. We have our day in November. Don't thank an active duty serviceman either. They had their day last weekend on Armed Forces Day. Today is the day, or this weekend is when we remember our fallen. And we pay our respects to the Gold Star families, which there are many here in Collin County. The day originated back after the Civil War. It was originally known as Decoration Day. And in both the South and the North, families would gather to decorate and put flowers on the graves of their fallen family members, both Confederate and Northern. Here in Collin County, we are privileged as a city to have an Armed Services Memorial Board on which I serve. And we are constantly researching and trying to identify men and women that from our county that have died while serving our country. And thus far, we have identified 424 of these fallen warriors, one woman and the rest men. And they span all the way back to the Mexican-American War of 1846 to the current War on Terror. We are adding 8 new names to our wall that we've recently discovered. And there will be some, I'm working on a video. We're not having a ceremony for the city either, but I'm working on a video that will be put on Facebook and probably broadcast on social media on Monday to honor the 8 new names that we've added. Also wanted to point out that, we're in this coronavirus pandemic. It's not the first time we've been there as a country, as well as a county. Just want you to know that in 1918, almost 50% of the men that we lost from Collin County, 31 of them out of 60, I think we had 62, or no, excuse me, we had more than that. We had like 65 men. 31 of those men died from the Spanish flu, compared to 32 that died from combat. We had a few others that died from typhoid. But illness was really the predominant foe to our fighting men back in World War I, and from the men from Collin County, 31 of them died from the Spanish flu, compared to 32 that actually died in combat. So it was a pretty vicious thing, but we got past it and we survived, and I know we'll do this year. I just want to tell you a couple of stories about some of the men that are on our walls that I honor in our portrait project. But the first one, and here's our wall of honor, by the way. If you haven't seen our Veterans Memorial Wall, it's out at Craig Ranch. And on this wall, we have inscribed the names of 424 men and one woman who gave up every one of their tomorrows so that we can have the freedoms that we enjoy. But I'd like to tell the stories, and I like to start with this story. Some of you may have known this young man. This is Brian Smith. His father was a very well-known orthodontist here in McKinney. He was an Army veteran himself, and Brian was a young Eagle Scout. If you go to Pecan Grove Cemetery on Memorial Day, most of the graves that are marked with flags, those were identified by Brian as part of his Eagle Scout project. Brian went off to University of Texas, got a history degree, and then he attended Baylor and got a Juris Doctorate, and he became a practicing attorney here in McKinney. When the War on Terror after 9/11 erupted, Brian wanted to serve his country, so he went to his recruiter. They said, "Good, you're a lawyer, we could use a JAG officer." He said, "No, I want to be a soldier." And so he became a tank commander, served with the 1st Infantry Division. And it was in July, I believe, of 2004, when he was on patrol in an area not too far from Fallujah, when something got his attention outside of his tank. He decided to get out and inspect it, and he was killed by an Iraqi sniper. Brian was the first man from Collin County, our first casualty in the War on Terror, and he was our first one in the 21st century. Brian didn't have to serve, and yet he did, because he wanted to put his country first. And those are the men, and those are the stories that I love telling. Now I just want to transition and show you some of the portraits that are the new ones that are going into the courthouse. This is Harold Patterson. I believe Harold was from Anna. He was a seaman, first class, stationed of all things on the USS Arizona. You can see over his right-hand shoulder, I put a representation of the Arizona. He was one of 4 men from Collin County that we lost on December 7th, 1941, from the sinking of the Arizona. All of these men that we lost in the Pearl Harbor attack all were assigned to the USS Arizona. So he will be the second of the 4 whose portrait will reside in the courthouse. And this is one of the new ones that will be installed definitely in November. We have 2 brothers this year that are going to be installed side by side. This is Captain Gerald Derryberry. He was an early one. He actually served, he was a B-24 pilot, and he served in North Africa early in the war. Came back stateside, probably to take his experience to train others. And in 1943, June of 43, He was flying a B-24 out in California and was involved in a training accident that took his life. And he had a younger brother. This is Lee Derryberry. By the way, the Derryberries are, they hail from the Frisco, McKinney area. Lee joined the Army, was a corporal. He was in the 1st Cavalry. In preparing for this, I realized I made a mistake. He actually had been wounded once before he was killed, so I need to add an oak leaf cluster to his Purple Heart. But Lee participated in the invasion of the Philippines when MacArthur returned. And you see portrayed in the background is some soldiers getting off of an amphibious assault craft. And he was killed in 1944 in the Philippines, serving his country. Both Lee and Gerald were laid to rest side by side, I believe, in Pecan Grove Cemetery. And these portraits will ultimately be installed, and so they'll be our second set of brothers that will be side by side. Excuse the red mark here. I think it was an artifact of my stylus. While Lee was getting ready to invade Lady, William Burnett of Farmersville was stationed on the USS Johnston. The interesting thing about what I've learned from this young man is that he and his father was a Baptist minister, and he and his father both enlisted into the Navy together and attended basic training together. Basic training is an arduous experience by yourself, but I couldn't imagine being in boot camp with my father, especially when they do the group punishment when somebody messes up and everybody pays a price. I'd hate to have my father be mad at me because I screwed up, or I'd hate to be mad at my father because he screwed up. So, but he was on the USS Johnson, and while MacArthur's troops were preparing to invade, Johnson was off Samar Island on the other side, the peninsula from where MacArthur's ships were, when this big task force of Japanese cruisers and armada basically was getting ready to ambush MacArthur's task force. The Johnson small destroyer by itself essentially confronted this large naval task force and basically on a suicide mission and attacked these ships and basically caused the Japanese to suspend their attack, basically helping save MacArthur's forces. Unfortunately, the Johnson was sunk, and it was sunk in extremely deep part of in the Philippine Trench. And just last November, it was the remains of this shipwreck were discovered. The skipper was from Oklahoma, Cherokee Indian named Ernest Evans, and he got the Medal of Honor in this incident. So I was able to discover the story about this man when I attended an event in Farmersville last fall. So I appreciate getting around and meeting people and getting the photographs. This is Bud Lacey. Bud was, I believe, from Farmersville. He was a tech sergeant. He landed, I think, on Utah Beach during D-Day, and then participated in the hedgerow fighting. So portrayed in the background is some dense vegetation to represent the hedgerows that he fought in. That was a really bitter fight, and he lost his life in July of 1944, about a month after he had landed in Normandy. This is Coxswain, Gwen Anderson of McKinney. We discovered his name a couple years ago and added it to the wall through reviewing some records of naval personnel and Marines. And he was stationed on the USS Ben Franklin. And in March of 1945, the Franklin was off the coast of Japan, and they were launching. They were the closest ship, the closest American presence to Japan, and they were launching missions, attack aircraft from the Franklin to attack the mainland of Japan. And a Japanese kamikaze plane came out and hit the Franklin, and it was loaded with about 31 aircraft that were fully armed and fully loaded with fuel, and it caused just a major major fire, and over 800 sailors, including Coxswain Anderson here, lost their life. This past spring, I had to go get a new set of tires over at Thompson Tire on a Saturday morning, and I decided to venture off to the library, and I found his picture in the, I think, McKinney class 1941 yearbook that they had in the library, and was able to use that to make this portrait of him. Spanning into the Vietnam era, this is Specialist Fourth Class Martin Rogers of Prosper. Martin, it's kind of hard to see in this, but he has accumulated 10 air medals with for valor, which you can see on his chest. And he was a door gunner on the Huey, and he was with assigned to the 1st Cav Division. I can't remember, I guess in 1970, he was on a mission and his Huey developed some engine trouble, and it had to ditch into the water. And Martin survived the ditching because he was seen clinging on to one of the skids of the Huey before the Huey sank. But by the time they were able to go and send a crew out to rescue him, he had fallen underwater and drowned. Martin is the youngest helicopter crewman. He was 18 years old. He is the youngest helicopter crewman to die in the Vietnam War. And that's according to some research that R.D. Foster, my partner, has done. Now, those were the portraits that are new, that are going into the courthouse. And of course, by the time we get to November, I'll have some additional ones. I'm constantly working, constantly researching. But I've discovered in the process a lot of heroes from our community that unfortunately don't qualify to go on our wall of honor because they're not from Collin County. And this is one of them, and it's a vexing problem I'm still trying to solve. But this is Private First Class Wilna Lyles. She was a school teacher. She got a degree from Stephen F. Austin, which was not a common thing for women to do in the late 30s. Her mother was worked for the Selective Service in Dallas. And we don't know the story, but for some reason, she came up from Dallas and enlisted in the Women's Army Corps in McKinney. Unfortunately, that doesn't qualify her just because she enlisted here to be put on our wall. And I'm still doing some research, seeing if I can find a physical address that showed that she lived in McKinney, then bingo, she's in there. But I wanted to tell her story. It was not a common thing for women to do. Basically, the Army said, hey, we can bring women into these non-combatant roles and free up these men so that they can carry a rifle. Unfortunately, the men didn't like that, and they spread a lot of nasty rumors about these women, and it made it very difficult for the Army to recruit these women. But they played extremely valuable roles, and she was assigned to a group in Africa, in Liberia, where they were basically all the mail that was sent by the troops had to be screened. And these were large groups of women that were doing this job. They had other roles they played as well. But at any rate, in May, right after the war ended, it was still going on in the Pacific, she was transitioning along with 18 other women in a C-47 off the coast of Africa, headed to Liberia, where we had a major base. when a plane went missing over the ocean, and it's never been found, and her remains have never been found either. We don't know why she came to McKinney, but she did enlist in the Army in McKinney, but she was a Dallas native as far as we know. And I just think it's important that we recognize her contribution as well. This is Colonel Neil Kirby. He was from Wichita Falls, and I believe he resided probably in Grand Prairie as well. He got the Medal of Honor. He was one of the very first fighter aces in the war to get the Medal of Honor. He actually lived for about a month. He was able to wear it. But after he was awarded the Medal of Honor, he was, and it was awarded to him in October, I think, of 1943. General MacArthur put him into a command role, took him out of combat. Yeah, he didn't like that. His accomplishment is that he shot down 6 Japanese Zeros on a single mission, and that was the impetus for getting him the Medal of Honor. A month after he received the Medal of Honor, he went out on a mission and was unfortunately shot down and killed. And they found his body and remains in 1947, and they brought him back, and he's buried here in Dallas, I think at the Hillcrest Cemetery, Hillcrest Sparkman Cemetery down in Dallas. But he's a local Medal of Honor recipient hero that not very well known. He named his wife was his wife's name was Virginia, and she had this really pretty red hair, and so the name of his fighter that he flew was called Fiery Ginger. This is another local from Dallas. This is Ralph Noble, and he attended SMU. Whether he was drafted or regardless of how he got there, he ended up, as many did in those days, serving in the Navy. He had an engineering degree, and he was an engineering officer on one of the small naval craft that was used to screen the landing craft as they were going to Omaha Beach. You know, the Germans had mined that area pretty extensively, and so these craft basically were cutting a path through these minefields so that the landing craft could follow them and not encounter the mines. And as they were approaching the beach, the Germans started lobbing artillery rounds. And of course, one round landed on one side, and then the second round landed on the side right next to them. And so this had now given the Germans the information to know, the range and whatnot. And so the third round was then focused on the ship and hit it right in the middle, and he lost his life. There was a famous sitcom years later, I think it was called Benson. And in that particular sitcom, the actor who played, I think, the governor that Benson, who was like a butler, served to, was actually his older brother in real life. So we discovered his name last year. And so as we're approaching here in a couple of weeks, D-Day, it's good to remember men like Ralph Noble. This is another D-Day man. His portrait is currently hanging in the courthouse. This is Glenn Stevens of Anna. Now, a year ago, we knew that he was on our Wall of Honor, and we knew that he served in the Army, but we didn't know anything about his unit or anything. And we discovered that he was actually in the 82nd Airborne, and he was one that jumped into D-Day and into Normandy and actually lost his life on June the 6th, 1944. And so we found a good picture of him and was able to make this portrait that we put in the courthouse last year. Everybody who served in the Air Force knows about Lance Sijon. He's the only Air Force Academy graduate to earn the Medal of Honor. Well, this was his squadron commander, as well as the pilot that was lost with Lance. He was a squadron commander of 480th Tactical Fighter Squadron. David Craig, the developer of Craig Ranch, David's father was also in this same squadron at the same time. But he had selected, as a squadron commander, he could had his choice of people he wanted to fly in the back seat as a weapons system officer. And so he picked Lance Sajan. At any rate, it was in November of '67, they were dropping these munitions along the Ho Chi Minh Trail at night that had a special fuse in them that was designed to detonate, 20 minutes, time delayed after they were dropped. The idea being is that the North Vietnamese would see these bombs in the road and thinking that they were duds and resume traffic. And then as the convoys would start moving down the trail, these bombs would start randomly detonating. What they didn't know was that at the time was that these fuses were faulty. And when they released them from the aircraft, they detonated immediately. John Armstrong's remains have never been found. He's still missing in action. Lance Sajan in his backseat was able to eject. He had a compound fracture to his leg. His hand, one of his hands had all the fingers bent backwards and was mangled horribly. And he landed in this extremely rugged, harsh terrain in Laos, and miraculously survived for 45 days. And all he could do was crawl on his backside. And he ended up crawling and finally made it to one of the roads along the Ho Chi Minh Trail. They talk about the trail as being, you think of it as a singular road, but it was a series of roads and trails. He made it to one of them and was ultimately picked up by the North Vietnamese, where he resisted with all his effort, and eventually was taken to Hanoi, put in the Hanoi Hilton. And in January of 1968, several months after he was shot down, he ended up dying, of pneumonia. And his efforts to resist became an inspiration to the prisoner of war, so that were being held with him. And in 1975, I believe it was, President Gerald Ford awarded the family the Medal of Honor, and posthumously. But this was the guy that flew in the front seat, and he's from Garland, Texas. There's a school in Saxe, an elementary school named John Armstrong Elementary, named after him. And I discovered that and went to the school and was able to get a picture of him to create this portrait, which, by the way, I have shared with Lance Sajan's sister, who has a remarkable foundation to tell his story. Whoop. This is a portrait. I'm sorry. This is a portrait that's currently in the courthouse, Thomas Caraway of Farmersville. But this particular version you're seeing is not. It's getting ready to be. I'm getting ready to replace the portrait that's in there. When I created the original portrait, I did not have any official confirmation that he was a Silver Star recipient. I'm pretty. Anytime when we put these medals on people, and when people wear medals, anything above the Silver Star, I want to know that the person had it, because unfortunately, there's just a lot of people out there that are claiming awards and decorations that they never earned, and I think that's a huge affront to the servicemen that earn these medals. So at any rate, I didn't have confirmation that he had a Silver Star. And what happened was, about a year ago, I was commissioned to do a portrait of a man over in Farmersville and who served in Vietnam. And all I had was a picture of his shadow box. And in the shadow box, there were some things that were in the shadow box that made me suspect. There was a mixture of both enlisted and officer badges. And so I couldn't figure out what this person's rank was. I wanted to have some additional verification of a Silver Star before I put it on a portrait. And so the wife, who was not married to him at the time and didn't know a thing about the military, I just simply called her and said, what rank was he? I'm confused. And so she takes a picture of a newspaper article in the scrapbook. And in this newspaper article, it says, so-and-so is the second Silver Star recipient from the city of Farmersville in Vietnam. And he was a sergeant. And so I said, well, that's great. I now have enough to justify putting a Silver Star on him. But then I said, who was the first? And it was written on the second page, which she didn't send me. So I called her up and I said, can you send me the rest of the article? Because I want to know who this other Silver Star recipient was. And she sent it to me. And it listed Tommy Caraway, the gentleman you see portrayed here, as the first from Farmersville to earn a Silver Star in Vietnam. So at that point, I decided, I have to do it. And so it's not the custom of the Army to wear the full medals, but to me, whenever somebody's decorated for valor at that level, it looks so much more majestic, so much more noble. And so I redid his portrait with the full medals and getting ready to have it printed, and I'll just make arrangements to go up to the courthouse and take the existing portrait out of the frame and put this one in there. So I'm getting close to the end here. Just wanted to tell you a couple stories about some of the things that we've learned since we built this wall. One of R.D. Foster, by the way, is the man we can thank for this wall. It was his efforts that led to its creation. One of his best friends that he wanted to honor was James Malone, who you see portrayed in the front. James kind of liked the girls, and the girls like James. And through RD's website, which is ccfreedomfighters.com, he was able to reunite some children of James that they didn't know. And so what you see here is, you see on the far left, you see one of his sons. Next to him, another one of his daughters. And then on the other side, another daughter. And these were all from 3 different mothers. And they didn't even know they had siblings until they all got interested in trying to figure out who their father was. And it was James Malone. The young man standing on the far right is the son of the man in the blue shirt. And so that would be James's grandson. And when you look at the picture of James Malone and you look at his grandson, they're spitting images. And so this was a unique thing. And the Wall of Honor that we have over in Craig Ranch helped reunite these family members that didn't know. Incidentally, the son lives in Washington State. One of the daughters lives in Fort Worth, and the other one lives in Kansas. So they were spread out all throughout the country. And I think I've got one more slide here. For some reason, I'm trying to advance this thing, but
I believe Colin looks like he's frozen in his frame. It may be his internet. Right. I guess we'll, while Colin's working on that, we want to express our great appreciation for him coming out at the last moment and sharing this wonderful story with us. And this picture here, this last one he's sharing with us is, I mean, how awesome is that? Tying the families back together to someone. So I want to give also a big applause for Frank Walker for getting with Colin and working this out at kind of a last minute situation. And this is just a perfect thing for Memorial Day. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to share today before we adjourn? We can't ask Colin questions because I think we've lost him.
Well, I think it might be interesting, Mike, to share on the meeting for next week with Charlotte.
You didn't
With the
mute your
museum.
phone. We can't hear you. So, go ahead.
If we could share about Charlotte with the Holocaust Museum, I'm going to try to get her to forward me the presentation. And so at least she said she could zoom it in from hers, but we'll have that too for the Holocaust Museum at Rick's next week.
Okay.
And I have heard that presentation and it is dynamic.
I'm hoping that we get a few more RSVPs and we'll be able to work that out. I know a few people are going to be traveling, so that's the case. Anything else from anyone? All right. With that said, it's 1 o'clock. We'll adjourn this week's meeting. I really want to thank everyone for joining us this week, and I hope you have a wonderful Memorial Day weekend, and keep those that served that have died in your thoughts and prayers this Monday. And again, from Mark Potter and the rest of the team, thank you very much for all your flag support. We could not do it without every one of you. So super job, folks, and have a great weekend. You can unmute them, Celeste, if they want to scream something back before you cut them off.
Hi, everybody.
Anybody have anything they want to say before they take off? I'm going to go over to Early Bees and go to the beach.
Sounds good.
All right. Have a great weekend. Bye, George.
Bye-bye.